بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم أما بعد. So in the previous lessons we were talking about introductory points. We kind of finished all of that and we finished off talking about Arabic letters. Now we're going to get into a major part of tajweed, and that is to focus on the pronunciation of letters, which is known as the Makharij. And those of you who are here in the previous lessons that we had in the summer, we finished a little bit after this portion, so we still are doing the review. So today we're going to talk about what's called the Makharij, or the points of articulation, if you will. Basically, the position of your mouth when you're pronunciating the letter. So this is in Arabic, it's called Makharij. And Makharij actually literally means places of exit. So when you're reciting a particular letter, where is that letter exiting from? What is going to be the position of your mouth when that letter exits? That is what Makharij are. So every letter in the Arabic language has a makhraj. It's not that every single letter has its own individual makhraj. Some share the same, but every letter is going to have a makhraj. So what we discussed before is that the scholars of tajweed, they had an organization of the makharij, and that is going to be, you start from the lowest point, meaning the furthest point from your mouth, which is the bottom of the throat, and then you finish all the letters of the throat, and then you come upward. Then you start talking about the letters that originate from the back of the mouth. Then you end up talking about those that originate from the middle, then the tip of the mouth, and then finally you finish off with the nose. So that makes, there's a difference of opinion as to exactly how many makharij there are, but around 17 that Imam Ibn al-Jazari mentioned. And we are going to discuss those makharij today, inshallah. So the first makhraj is going to be the emptiness of the mouth, right? Emptiness of the mouth. The way Shaykh Ayman, Hafidahullah, has it is actually he starts from the bottom of the throat. So we'll just follow his organization. Some of the other books start with the emptiness of the mouth. So I'm just going to follow here. So let me just finish drawing the way he has. I can't do all the details that he has in the book. If you guys want those details, you have to purchase the book. Let's see here. Okay. So he talks about different places where letters can come from. Letters can come from, we have the throat, then you have the mouth, then you have, he has emptiness of the mouth as one, and then you have the nose. So he says 4 real places where letters can come from. I'm trying to find that chart. So those are the essential places where the sounds come from. I'm just going to finish drawing this diagram. His mouth. And let's just say nasal cavity. I don't know. Let's just do it like that. Right? It's connected somehow, but and I have to draw his tongue. His tongue is going to be here. Okay. So this is the area of the throat, the green. Then the area of the mouth is going to be in the black. and then the nasal cavity is going to be red. It's a big nasal cavity. I don't think it's actually that large. It's like bigger than his mouth. If you have a large nose, maybe, then the cavity is going to be bigger. So these are the locations. Yes. Maybe the mouth should have been bigger like that. Whatever. So now we start from the scholars of Tajweed start here and mention all the letters that emerge from these areas. Then they go into all of the letters that emerge from here. And then they finish off with this one. This is not even that much. Most of the focus is going to be here and here. All right. So we're going to do Makharij number 1, and that is the furthest part of the throat. So let me draw a line here. I'm going to write it in Arabic too. It's called Aqsa al-Halq. Okay. You guys just write in your notes that this is furthest part of the throat. Actually, I'll just write it for ease. Furthest part of the throat. Who can tell me what letters come from here? Hamza and Ha. Correct. Hamza and Ha. So I'm going to write that here. Hamza and Ha. All right. Then that's where Hamza and Ha come from. So when you say Ha, Ha, it's actually coming from the furthest part. Basically where your throat meets like your collarbone. That's like the furthest part. So when you say Ha or you can notice that the sound emerges from there. Then we move on to a higher portion, and we're gonna go to the middle of the throat. So let me just put an arrow here, middle of the throat. Which letters come from middle of the throat? Okay, this is called Wastul Halq. I'm just gonna write middle. The letters that come from here is Ain and Ha. Ha, Ha. When you recite these and you recite Ha, you'll notice these are lower. It goes a little higher. Ha. It goes a little higher in the position in the throat. So this is where these two letters emerge. Then, just gonna draw it here, all the way up here. Let's see. And this is called Adana al-Halq, in the highest part of the throat, or closest part of the throat. Halq is the throat. Let's see how they translate it here. Closest. Closest meaning closest to your lips, because closest is relative. Which letters come from here? Ghain and Kha. Ghain and Kha. So when you say Gha, that is higher in the throat than A. And A is higher than A. When you say Kha, that's higher. That's like up, it's actually up here. Like, I had it kind of lower, so it's going to be higher. When you say Kha, that's higher than Ha, and Ha is higher than Ha. Right? So those are the first three Makharij, whose location are in the throat. Is that clear? Can you guys see it? Or I think all the black is making it. Maybe I should color his tongue red. You can see his tongue. Okay. And then I'll remove this thing here. The more simpler it is, the easier it'll be for you to see. Okay. So that is the throat letters. And these are known as the throat letters, or huruf halqi. And you'll need to know that later on. So throat letters are 6: hamza, ha, ain, ha, ghain, kha. For nun sakin, tanween, and those types of rulings, for idhar and stuff like that, you'll need to know the throat letters. Now, who can tell me what's the next? Makharij. What is the makharij of it? Sorry? That's right. So now, the furthest back portion of the tongue, as far as you can utilize, let's say right here. I'm just going to make a black dot here, so it becomes very visible. When that meets the upper palate, so let's say this is the upper palate. So this part of the tongue, when it meets the upper palate, and we will put it here, off. Okay, so you guys just write this down in the notes. It'll take me a while to write it in English. Furthest back part of the tongue, when it meets the palate. Qa, qa. So a lot of people struggle with the thickness in the letter qa. That's because they're not using the most back part of the tongue. It has to be as back as you can. Qa, qa. The further back you use of the tongue, the more isti'la sound will come from it. All right. Next, we have, so as you can see, we're slowly moving forward. We then have the back part of the tongue. Right, back part of the tongue when it touches a palate. So this is the extreme back, right? Extreme back of the tongue, or furthest back part of the tongue, whatever you want to call it. Then we have a letter that's a little bit further up. Not too much, but a little bit further up when it meets the palate. And that is going to be kaf. This is qa, ka, qa, ka. You can notice a little bit further up than qaf. Qaf, kaf, kaf. After that, we have the center of the tongue. Center of the tongue when it rises upward towards the palate. The English translation, from the middle of the tongue with the upper middle, from the middle of the tongue with the middle of the upper palate. From the middle of the tongue with the middle of the upper palate. So the middle of the tongue goes up when you say jim, jim. Now, there's also other aspects of the tongue that are working. So it's not only the center of the tongue that's making the noise, otherwise it'll sound like jim, jim. So that's not really how it sounds. It's jim, like how you would say J in English. It's practically the same thing. Jim in Arabic is the same as J in English. Right? Other letters are not exactly the same. Like ra is not the same. Ta is not the same as a T. Ra is not the same as an R. Jim, however, is the same as a J in English. Okay. So now the scholars of Tajweed have stated that when you say Jim, we notice that the center of the tongue goes up. Jim, jim, jim. Of course, the middle of the front of the tongue is working, but they have stated that this is the makhraj of jim. So we're going to write it here. Jim. Center of the tongue when it touches the middle of the upper palate. So the center of the upper palate. Also from the same place you have another makhraj, and that is going to be sheen. Sheen. Sheen and jim are very similar. The same makhraj. Right? Jim, sheen have the same makhraj. And you have a third letter. Ya, what they call ya mutaharrika. The ya that's not a sakin. So ya with a fatha, dhamma, or kasra. Ya, yi, you. So when you say ya, the center of the tongue goes up. When you say sheen, the center of the tongue goes up. So if you didn't have a center of your tongue, you wouldn't be able to say these letters properly. Or if you try to keep your tongue flat, you won't be able to say these letters. So you say, G. I don't know how you would say it. Yeah. Uh, if you open your mouth and try to say ya, jim, or sheen, you can't say it. It just sounds like no noise. Yeah. Yeah. There's no noise that comes from it, right? So you need the center of the tongue. And if you keep the palate away from the center of the tongue, you can't have these noises. So that's why these have that makharij. So these three letters come from the same makharij. Thereafter, we have bod. So bod is going to be, now he has a separate diagram for bod because it's more technical. You need an aerial view of the mouth. So I'm going to draw that, the aerial view of the upper palate. Upper palate. That doesn't look that great. All right. That also is just pretty bad. It has to be round at the top. This is your upper mouth. Okay, there we go. And here are the teeth. I don't want to count all of them. These are molars, front two teeth, lateral, canines, premolars, two of them, and then molars. Okay. So this is the teeth. It's good? All right. So for bod, there's more than one place where we need to focus. We are going to do this by coloring in this area. We'll make it longer. All right. So what will happen is in order for us to recite bod, this is the green and the red is how the tongue is going to press on this. This is the upper part of the mouth, right? So you're looking upward into a person, like this upper part, not the lower jaw, right? So the tongue is going to be here. So how does the tongue come onto the area? The sides of the tongue are going to be pressing here, and the tip of the tongue is gonna rest there, whilst the side is pressing. And then when you want to recite the letter, meaning when the bod has a haraka, you'll use the tip of the tongue. You'll release the tip of the tongue to make the noise. Okay, so it sounds like ba, ba, ba. So the sides of the tongue are up there. That's what makes that heavy noise, ba, ba. And when you want to say the letter, you want to give it a haraka, ba, bli, bu. That's coming from here. So the noise of the bod comes from here. The haraka comes from there. Now when bod is sakin, you don't necessarily need to release this. So if you say al-arab, 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 al-arab. So you shouldn't hear ba, ba. You shouldn't hear that when you're saying al-arab, because this doesn't release, right? And that noise is coming from here. So that is the makharaj of bod. The actual wording for it is going to be the edge of the tongue with the nearby upper molars. edge of the tongue, these sides of the tongue. So like this is not an image of a tongue, but it would be the side of the tongue. That would be the makhraj of Dad. So if we're going to draw it on the big image, it's going to be all of this. This is the makhraj of Dad on both sides. And we can't see his other side, so we're just going to do it on. We're just going to draw this side. So this is going to be Dad. Okay, and then that is the makhraj of Dad. Dad. All of this requires practice, but this is just the knowledge of where it comes from. Next, as you can tell, we're going further to the tip of the tongue now. We're covering all the letters that come from the tongue, and we finish the throat. The next letter is going to be Lam. And Lam comes from, says here, from the nearest part of both edges of the tongue to the utmost tip. So the edges of a tongue. Let's draw a tongue here. We use a red marker for that. The tongue. Okay? It's a tongue. Now, he actually has a diagram of a tongue. I'll just copy how he has it in the book. Just keep my bookmark here. All right, so the hafa, or the edge of the tongue, is like this much. Edge. This is called the hafa. This is what is engaged in the dad on the sides. Then you have tip of the tongue, which is going to be like that much. Tip of the tongue. Then you have the front portion of the tongue. Now they translate it in various ways, right? So for what I wrote as the tip of the tongue, they translate as frontmost. And then for the front, they translate it as tip. But from my understanding, tip is all the way at the front. The absolute front is the tip. Then a little bit behind that is the front of the tongue. Okay, so for lam, what is going to happen is you have the front of the tongue engaging with the ridges of the palate before the teeth. So if we go back here, there's ridges over here, right? If you use your tongue and you like touch the roof of your mouth, you'll feel that there's like ridges. Like if I was to draw this again, there's ridges there. So when you're saying lam, this part of the tongue is coming here, and it covers the area from after the canines. You have that tooth, this much area. Lam, lam. When you say la, it actually stretches from one canine to the next. That's how we had it before. One canine to the next. He doesn't use that definition here. That's weird. Is there too many teeth here? 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the canines. Way too many teeth. So you have the front two, then the next two, then the canines. Put it like that. So when you say lam, the tongue is here, but it's stretching from the amount of space that is taken up by the canines. La la. If you're thinking about lam, you're not just using the tip of the tongue. That's what you're feeling, but there's a lot more of tongue that's covering this area. It's from one canine actually. The entire part of the tongue is from one canine to the next in that area, the ridges area, before the teeth start. So where will let me do this. Lam would come from here. Lam. Looks like a J. Lam. All right. Now we go to Noon. Noon is the same thing as Lam almost, except the area of coverage is different. So you could say this is Lam. This much coverage is Lam. Then if the tip of the tongue, it touches the same area, but it covers less area than the Lam. The first 4 teeth. That is going to be Noon. When you say noon, the tongue becomes a little bit sharper than when you say lam. La, na. The tongue becomes slightly sharper, so the coverage area is less. This is being used, this part of the tongue, to touch the ridge area before the teeth. However, the tongue is slightly sharper than it is for lam. Lam, noon. If you say la, na, the tongue becomes slightly more sharp, right? So that is why the coverage area for noon is going to be the 4 teeth in the front, not the canines. Whereas lam is going to also cover the canines. Wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. And thereafter we have ra. Ra. This is simple. Ra is now going to cover let's see. I believe it was the makharij that we have for noon we had for ra, right? Is that right? You guys remember? Okay, so I need to make a correction here. It starts from lam. Lam would be from the premolars, right? You guys remember that? Yes. So lam covers this much area, not the canines. You see, if you feel the tooth that's after your canine, that's called a premolar. It's not as big as your actual molar. Actual molar is like big, right? You got these big guys here, and then you even got the wisdom molars here, and then you got 2 pairs of premolars. So lam is going to stretch, the tongue is going to cover the distance of the 2 premolars actually. Lam, it's very vast. So that was a mistake. For noon is going to cover from canine to canine. Okay, canine to canine. Same area, same usage of the tongue, tip of the tongue, front of the tongue we should say. Front of the tongue. So la, na, noon is covering from canine to canine. The ra is just the first 4 teeth. That is going to be ra. Ra. Now there's a difference in how they're pressing. You could write ra like that, like a check, or you could just do it this way, like that. So I'm going to read what he says for ra. He says, from the tip of the tongue, with what lies opposite to it of the gums, close to the articulation point of the noon. It's kind of difficult. And then there's more. It says the gap through which a part of the sound passes when pronouncing ra, without which the articulation point would be locked completely, which would result in the forbidden repetition. I don't know. I'm going to read the Arabic to make sense out of it. So he says here, الفجوة التي يمر منها جزء الصوت عند نطق را. He says when you're saying the ra, there's going to be a gap on the side of the mouth through which air passes through. والتي لولاها لانقفل المخرج تماما. If there was no gap, then you wouldn't be able to say the ra. مما يؤدي إلى تكرير المنهي عنه. So we'll talk about that later, but essentially, if I can explain in my own words, when you say ra, your front of the tongue, not absolute tip, ra, ra. So that, I guess if you use the absolute tip, I don't know how you would do that. That you'd have to like make it sharp, but it's all of this area, ra, ra, that area, and it's covering a very small area. So it's the like if you say for lam, you need to cover all this area. It is the front area, front of the tongue, but this much is used of it. Then for noon, this much of the front. Then for ra, this much of the front. Because it gets smaller, you're covering less and less space. And for ra, this area must touch the gums really quickly. It doesn't settle there. Unlike lam and noon, it's just pressed on there until you release it. Ra is just, it goes quickly, it touches it, and then it moves away. So if you want to practice ra, you could try positioning your tongue for lam, noon, ra. You just have to think about it. But it has very quickly. So that is where, if you can say lam and noon, then your tongue can touch the area required for ra. Right? That means your tongue can reach the area because it's the same makharij basically. It's just a little bit sharper. Lam, noon, ra. You just touch it quickly. We're going to go into the sifat later on. We'll mention it a little bit more. So if you could say, it's also, dal is kind of near there. I feel like ra is somewhere near lam and dal. Say la, da, ra, ra, ra. It's around that same area. Ra, ra. That's where you get that extra noise. In English, if you say r, ra, ra, the tip of the tongue does not touch the roof of the mouth. Like if you say road, road, rain, robots. What other R words are there? Range, huh? Rabbit, rabbit. So rabbit is with a fatha, rabbit. Ru, re. So that is not touching that area. The Arabic one is going to be ra, ri, ru. It actually touches the palate up above. You should be able to hear that difference. Ra, ra. Ru, ru. Ri, ri. There's a difference there. And that is because the tip of the tongue is actually, it's like flicking that area. Okay, so that is the makhraj of ra. And then later on, we're going to talk about the heavy ra and the light ra. How much time do you have? Less than 5 minutes? Okay. How much is left? There's still a few left. We can pause. Does anyone have any questions regarding any makhraj? Anything anyone struggles with that I haven't covered? Oh, okay. So what's left is we're going to talk about, we're going to get to the edge. The lips and all of that is going to come to play. So how many did we cover now? Covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we covered 10 of the makharij here. Right? I can number them. Be easier for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, I think 11 because, oh no, Vlad is here. 7, 8. This is also 8. So 9 and 10. So we stopped at Ra. Do you have questions? Okay. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Practice the amount for Surah Al-Baqarah. What is it going to be now? وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Yeah? Practice that inshallah. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.